I thought he was my soulmate until the DNA test revealed we shared the same grandfather. What started as innocent curiosity about my family tree turned into the most horrifying discovery of my life, and it explained everything. Let me start from the beginning. I'm Emma. I'm 28 years old, and up until 6 months ago, I thought I had the perfect love story. You know, those couples everyone envies. That was us. Ryan and I met 3 years ago at a coffee shop near the university, where I was finishing my Master's in psychology. I was that girl who always had her nose buried in a book, completely oblivious to the world around me. But Ryan, he had this way of making you feel like you were the only person in the room. I remember that first day so clearly. I was struggling with this massive psychology textbook, trying to balance my laptop, coffee, and notes all at once when everything came crashing down. Papers everywhere, coffee soaking into my keyboard. It was a disaster. That's when this voice behind me said, "Well, that's one way to make an impression." I turned around, ready to snap at whoever was making fun of my clumsiness. But there he was. Tall, with these incredible green eyes, and this crooked smile that made my heart skip a beat. Ryan didn't just help me clean up the mess. He sat with me for the next 4 hours while I rewrote my notes. Talked about everything. Psychology, his business degree, our families, our dreams. There was this instant connection that I'd never experienced before. Felt like coming home to someone I'd been searching for my entire life. Our families were pretty different, which we always joked about. I grew up in a small town called Millfield, about 2 hours north of the city. My family was what you'd call traditionally close-knit. My parents, David and Linda, had been together since high school. I have one younger sister, Megan, who's basically my best friend. We're the kind of family that has Sunday dinners every week, knows all the neighbors, and where everyone's business is everyone's business, in the best way possible. Ryan, on the other hand, came from what he called a complicated family situation. His parents divorced when he was 12, and he was raised primarily by his mother, Carol, in the city. His father wasn't really in the picture much after the divorce. Ryan had always been a bit vague about his dad's side of the family. When I'd ask about grandparents, uncles, cousins, he'd just shrugged and say, "Mom's side is all I really know." Dad's family kind of scattered after the divorce. I found it a little sad, honestly. Coming from such a tight-knit family, I couldn't imagine not knowing your relatives. But Ryan seemed okay with it, so I never pushed. He'd always say, "I've got all the family I need right here," and pull me close. It was sweet, and I respected that some people just weren't as family-oriented as I was. What I loved most about Ryan was how he balanced me out. I was the overanalyzer, the one who planned everything down to the minute. Ryan was spontaneous, adventurous, always ready to try something new. He'd show up at my apartment with plane tickets to somewhere I'd never been, or surprise me with weekend camping trips. He taught me to live in the moment, and I helped him think things through. We were perfect complements to each other. Our relationship moved fast, but it felt natural. 6 months after that coffee shop meeting, we moved in together. A year after that, we were talking about marriage. Ryan proposed on our 2nd anniversary, right back at that same coffee shop where we met. He'd somehow convinced the owner to let him recreate our first meeting, complete with scattered papers and everything. When I looked down to help clean up the mess, there was a ring box among the fake papers. "I want to spend the rest of my life cleaning up messes with you," he said, down on one knee. I ugly cried right there in front of everyone. It was perfect. Planning our wedding brought our families together in the sweetest way. My parents absolutely adored Ryan from the moment they met him. Dad would always say Ryan reminded him of himself at that age. Ambitious, but grounded. Funny, but respectful. Mom loved how Ryan would help with dishes after family dinners without being asked, and how he remembered little details about everyone. The one slightly awkward thing was how small Ryan's side would be at the wedding. It would just be his mom, Carol, a few friends, and maybe an uncle or two that he barely knew. Carol was lovely, a warm, chatty woman who worked as a nurse and clearly adored her son. But I could tell she felt a bit overwhelmed by my large, boisterous family at first. During one of our wedding planning sessions, I casually suggested that maybe we could do some genealogy research to find more of Ryan's extended family. It might be fun to invite some long-lost relatives, I said. Maybe find some cousins or great-aunts who'd love to reconnect. Ryan's reaction was stronger than I expected. "Emma, trust me, there's nothing interesting to find there. My dad's side is just a bunch of people who don't talk to each other. Let's focus on the family we actually know and love." He wasn't angry exactly, but there was this firmness in his voice that told me the subject was closed. I dropped it immediately. I figured everyone has family drama, and maybe Ryan's was more complicated than most. Besides, I had enough family enthusiasm for both of us. Our wedding was beautiful, small and intimate, held in my parents' backyard under string lights, and surrounded by Mom's flower garden. Ryan's mom gave the sweetest toast about how she'd never seen her son as happy as he was with me. My dad welcomed Ryan to the family with genuine tears in his eyes. Everything felt perfect, like all the pieces of our life were finally falling into place. We spent our honeymoon in Italy, Ryan's surprise choice. He'd always talked about wanting to see the architecture in Rome and Florence, and we spent 2 weeks getting completely lost in ancient history and incredible food. I remember lying on our hotel balcony in Tuscany, watching the sunset, and thinking this was what happiness felt like. Pure, uncomplicated happiness. And when we got back, we settled into married life easily. We found a cute little house to rent on the outskirts of the city, close enough to both our jobs, but far enough to feel like we had our own space. Ryan landed a great position at a marketing firm, and I started working as a therapist at a community mental health center. We were building something real together. The thing about Ryan that I loved most was how he made ordinary moments feel special. Saturday morning pancakes became elaborate cooking experiments. Grocery shopping became adventures where we'd de-pick one ingredient we'd never tried before and build a meal around it. Even doing laundry together somehow became fun because Ryan would put on music and we'd dance around the basement while waiting for the cycles to finish. But there were little things that struck me as odd sometimes. Ryan had almost no photos of himself as a child or teenager. When I asked about it, he said most of them were lost when his parents divorced and they moved apartments quickly. He also had this strange reaction whenever we'd drive through certain parts of town. He'd get quiet, almost tense, like he was trying not to be recognized. When I asked about it once, he just said, some areas brought up bad memories from his parents' divorce. I chalked it up to everyone having their sensitive spots. God knows I had places and situations that made me uncomfortable because of past experiences. Marriage is about accepting those things about each other and creating new, better associations together. Our first year of marriage flew by in a blur of settling in, building careers, and just enjoying being together. We started talking more seriously about kids, maybe buying a house, taking on more responsibility at our jobs. Everything felt like it was moving in the right direction. Then came the family reunion that changed everything. The idea for the family reunion came from my Aunt Patricia, my dad's sister who lives in California. She's one of those genealogy enthusiasts who spends hours on ancestry websites and has family trees mapped out going back centuries. Every Christmas, she'd show up with new discoveries about some great-great-grandmother who came over from Ireland, or a distant cousin who fought in the Civil War. "I think it's time for a proper family gathering," she announced during one of our video calls in March. "I've been researching the family history, and there are so many relatives we've lost touch with over the years. Wouldn't it be wonderful to reconnect everyone?" My parents were immediately on board. They loved any excuse to bring people together, and the idea of meeting relatives we'd never known existed was exciting. Patricia had apparently been in touch with several branches of the family tree that had scattered over the decades, and she was planning to invite everyone to a big reunion in July at a park near our hometown. When I told Ryan about it, his reaction was ... strange. Not negative exactly, but he seemed uncomfortable with the whole idea. "That sounds like a lot," he said, not looking up from his laptop. "Big family gatherings can be overwhelming." "But it'll be fun," I insisted. "Patricia says she's found relatives we didn't even know existed. There might be like 50 people there. Imagine all the family stories we'll hear." Ryan finally looked up, and there was something in his expression I couldn't quite read. Worry? Anxiety? Are these relatives from both sides of your family? "Well, mostly my dad's side, I think." That's the line Patricia's been researching. Why? Just curious. He closed his laptop and came over to sit next to me on the couch. "You know I'm not great with big crowds of strangers. But if it's important to you, of course I'll be there." I should have paid more attention to that conversation. Looking back, there were red flags I completely missed. The way he asked specifically about which side of the family, the slight tension in his voice, the fact that he seemed to need reassurance that it would mostly be strangers to him too. But I was too excited about the reunion to notice. I threw myself into helping Patricia coordinate everything. We created a family Facebook group, shared old photos, and started collecting addresses and phone numbers. It was amazing to see how many relatives came out of the woodwork. Cousins I'd heard mentioned but never met, great-aunts and great-uncles, even some second cousins from states I'd never visited. The most exciting discovery was when Patricia found a whole branch of the family that had moved to Canada in the 1960s. "Your great-uncle Robert's son moved to Toronto after college and started a family there," she told me over the phone. "I've been in touch with his grandson Michael, and he's planning to drive down with his whole family for the reunion." As the date got closer, Ryan became more and more tense about it. Started working longer hours, claiming he had a big project deadline. He'd come home exhausted and stressed, which wasn't like him at all. When I suggested he take a day off to relax before the reunion, he snapped at me. "I can't just take days off whenever I feel like it, Emma. Some of us have real responsibilities." I was hurt and confused. Ryan had never spoken to me like that before. When I tried to talk to him about it, he apologized immediately and claimed he was just stressed about work. 2 weeks before the reunion, Patricia called with more exciting news. "I found another branch," she said, practically bouncing with enthusiasm. "Turns out your great-grandfather had a brother who moved to the city back in the 1940s. That brother's grandson still lives there. His name is Robert Chen. He married a woman named Carol, and they had a son." Something cold ran down my spine. What was the son's name? Let me check my notes. ... Ryan Chen. But I think they got divorced, so he might go by his mother's maiden name now. I've been trying to track him down to invite him, but I haven't had any luck yet. I felt like the room was spinning. Ryan Chen, Carol, divorced. It couldn't be the same people. It had to be a coincidence. "Patricia," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "What was Carol's maiden name?" "Johnson, I think." "Why do you know them?" "Carol Johnson." Ryan's mother's name was Carol, and she'd mentioned once that Johnson was her maiden name before she married Ryan's father. My hands started shaking. "Patricia, I need to call you back." I hung up and stared at my phone for a long time. This couldn't be happening. There had to be an explanation. Maybe it was just a bizarre coincidence. Common names, after all. How many Ryan Chens could there be with mothers named Carol Johnson? But deep down, I knew. All those little things that had never quite made sense suddenly clicked into place. The way Ryan avoided certain parts of town, maybe because he'd grown up there and didn't want to be recognized. His vagueness about his father's family, his strange reaction to the reunion planning. The fact that he seemed to know his way around my hometown better than he should have, for someone who'd supposedly never lived there. When Ryan came home that night, I was sitting at the kitchen table with my laptop open to Patricia's family tree research. "We need to talk," I said. He took one look at my face and knew something was wrong. "What's going on?" "My aunt has been researching our family tree for the reunion." I turned the laptop around so he could see the screen. She found some interesting relatives. Ryan's face went completely white as he read Patricia's notes. For a long moment, neither of us said anything. "Emma," he finally whispered, "I can explain." "Can you?" I stood up, anger and confusion boiling over. "Can you explain how you never mentioned that you're apparently my cousin? Can you explain how you let me fall in love with you, marry you, without telling me we're related?" "I didn't know," he said quickly. I suspected something might be, but I wasn't sure. My dad never talked about his family. I thought maybe there was a connection, but you suspected. I felt like I was going to be sick. Suspected we might be related, and you said nothing. What was I supposed to do? Ryan ran his hands through his hair, a gesture I'd always found endearing, but now made me want to scream. "Tell you I thought we might be cousins based on some vague family stories I half remembered? Ruin what we had over something I wasn't even sure about?" "Yes," I shouted. "Yes, that's exactly what you were supposed to do, Emma. Please, calm down. Let's think about this rationally." Rationally, I laughed, but it came out more like a sob. "There's nothing rational about this situation, Ryan. We're married. We've been talking about having kids. Now I find out we're cousins. We're not that closely related," he said desperately. "If it's even true? Second cousins, maybe. Third, that's barely anything." "That's barely anything." I stared at him in disbelief. "That's barely anything to you?" The fight went on for hours. Ryan kept insisting that he hadn't been sure, that he'd hoped the family connection was distant or non-existent. He swore he'd never intended to deceive me, that by the time he realized there might be a problem, we were already so deep in our relationship that he didn't know how to bring it up. "I was scared," he finally admitted. "I was scared of losing you over something that might not even be true. So instead you chose to lie to me." "I never lied. I just didn't know how to tell you something I wasn't sure about." But I could see in his eyes that there was more to it. He had known, or at least strongly suspected, and he'd made the choice to stay quiet, to let our relationship continue, to marry me, all while carrying this secret. That night, Ryan slept on the couch. I lay in our bed staring at the ceiling, my mind racing. How had I not seen the signs? Were there physical similarities I'd missed? Did we have the same mannerisms, the same expressions? I tried to think of every story he'd told me about his childhood, every detail about his family, looking for clues I should have caught. The worst part was how everything I'd loved about our relationship now felt contaminated. The instant connection we'd felt when we met. Was that real attraction or some weird family recognition? The way we seemed to understand each other so perfectly. Was that love or shared genetics? Every sweet memory was now tainted with doubt and disgust. Over the next few days, Ryan kept trying to convince me that the family connection might not be real. "Patricia could be wrong," he'd say. "Family genealogy research isn't always accurate. People make mistakes, get confused about names and dates." But I could tell he didn't believe it himself. The coincidences were too strong, too specific. Carol Johnson, the timeline of his father's family moving to the city. Even the fact that Ryan had always seemed oddly familiar with my hometown despite claiming he'd never lived there. "There's only one way to know for sure," I told him finally. "Emma, no, we don't need to. We're getting a DNA test, Ryan. Both of us. And we're going to find out exactly how we're related." The look on his face told me everything I needed to know. He was terrified of what we'd find. The week after our fight was the longest week of our marriage. Ryan and I barely spoke except for the necessary logistics of sharing a house. He'd leave for work early and come home late. I'd hear him moving around the house at night, unable to sleep, just like I was unable to sleep. I couldn't concentrate on anything. My clients at the therapy center kept asking if I was okay. Apparently, I looked as horrible as I felt. My supervisor even pulled me aside to suggest I take a few personal days. Whatever's going on, she said gently, you need to deal with it before you can help anyone else. But how do you even begin to process something like this? How do you tell people that your husband might be your cousin? How do you explain that your entire marriage might be built on a lie, or at best a horrible omission of truth? I called in sick on Wednesday and spent the day researching. It's not genealogy. I couldn't bear to dig deeper into. It's Patricia's family tree findings. But the science and legalities of cousin marriage, what I found didn't make me feel any better. Technically, marriage between second cousins is legal in all 50 states. Even first cousins can legally marry in many places. From a purely legal standpoint, Ryan and I weren't in trouble. But legality and morality felt like completely different things to me. Legal didn't make it feel any less wrong, any less like a betrayal of everything I thought I knew about my life. The genetic concerns were more complicated. The risks for children of cousin marriages increase with how closely related the parents are. But for second or third cousins, the risks are only slightly higher than the general population. Again, the scientific facts didn't change how I felt emotionally about the situation. What bothered me most was the secrecy. Even if Ryan had genuinely been unsure about the family connection, even if the relationship was distant enough to be legally and medically acceptable, he should have told me about his suspicions. A marriage should be built on honesty, especially about something this significant. Thursday evening, Ryan finally broke the silence between us. I called Patricia, he said quietly. He was standing in the kitchen doorway. While I sat at the table picking at a dinner I had no appetite for, I looked up. You did what? I called your aunt, told her who I was, that I'm your husband, and that I think I might be the Ryan Chen she was looking for. My stomach dropped. Ryan, no. What did you tell her? The truth. He came and sat across from me, and I could see how exhausted he looked. I told her that my father was Robert Chen, that my mother was Carol Johnson, and that I'd been trying to figure out if there was a family connection between us.
What did she say?
She's excited. Ryan let out a bitter laugh. She thinks it's the most romantic thing in the world that two relatives found each other and fell in love without knowing they were family. She kept talking about fate and destiny. I felt sick. She doesn't understand. No, she doesn't. She wants us to come to the reunion as the surprise guests of honor. She's already started calling other family members to tell them about the amazing coincidence. Oh God, I put my head in my hands. Now, this is a nightmare. Emma, I'm so sorry. Should have handled this differently from the beginning. Should have told you the moment I suspected there might be a connection. I looked up at him. Why didn't you? Ryan was quiet for a long time. Because I was selfish, he said finally. Because I'd never felt about anyone the way I felt about you, and I didn't want to lose that. I told myself that if we were only distantly related, it didn't really matter. And by the time I realized it did matter, to you, even if not to me, I was in too deep to know how to tell you. But you knew it would matter to me. I knew it would matter to you, he agreed. I knew you'd react exactly the way you're reacting now, and I was a coward about it. At least he was being honest now. But his honesty came too late to fix the trust he'd broken. Patricia wants us to get a DNA test, I said. I know. She mentioned that on the phone. She wants us to do one of those Ancestry DNA kits, so she can see exactly how we're connected and add it to her research. Ryan nodded slowly. What do you want to do? The question hung between us. What did I want to do? Part of me wanted to refuse the test, to stay in this horrible limbo of not knowing for sure. If we never confirmed the relationship, maybe we could find a way to move past it. Maybe we could convince ourselves that Patricia was wrong, that it was all just a terrible coincidence. But I knew that wasn't realistic. The doubt would poison everything between us. Every time we touched, every time we talked about having children, every family gathering would be shadowed by the question of what we might be to each other. I need to know, I said finally. I can't live with the uncertainty, okay? Ryan reached across the table like he was going to take my hand, then stopped himself. We'll take the test. But not Patricia's test, I said quickly. I don't want this to be part of her genealogy project. I don't want our private business spread around the whole family. What do you mean? We'll do our own test. One of those DNA kits that shows genetic relationships. We'll find out how we're related, but we'll keep the results private until we decide what to do with the information. Ryan agreed, and that weekend we went to the pharmacy together to buy 2 DNA testing kits. It felt surreal, walking down the aisles like a normal couple doing normal errands. when we were actually buying tests to find out if our marriage was some kind of genetic mistake. The kits sat on our kitchen counter for 3 days before either of us touched them. Every time I walked past them, I felt a mixture of dread and desperate need to know. Ryan seemed to be avoiding the kitchen altogether. Finally, on Tuesday evening, I couldn't stand it anymore. "We're doing this tonight," I announced when Ryan got home from work. "Emma, are you sure? Once we know, we can't unknow. I can't live like this anymore. I can't sleep. I can't eat. I can't focus on anything. We have to know." The actual process was anticlimactic. Spit in a tube, seal it up, fill out the paperwork. We mailed both tests the next morning, and then we had to wait 4 to 6 weeks for results. Those weeks were torture. Ryan moved into the spare bedroom to give me space, but really we were both avoiding physical contact of any kind. The few times we accidentally touched, reaching for the same dish, brushing hands while passing in the hallway, we'd both recoil like we'd been burned. I threw myself into work, taking on extra clients and staying late at the office. Ryan did the same. We were like polite roommates who happened to share the same last name. We'd make small talk about groceries and bills, but we never talked about the tests or what we'd do when the results came back. My family noticed something was wrong, of course. Mom called constantly, worried about why I sounded so distant and stressed. Megan kept texting, asking if Ryan and I were having problems. I made excuses about work stress and wedding planning fatigue, but I could tell they weren't buying it. The worst part was that I still loved him. Even knowing what I knew, even feeling disgusted and betrayed, I still loved Ryan. When he'd come home from work looking exhausted and defeated, part of me wanted to comfort him. When I'd catch him looking at me with such sadness and regret, part of me wanted to forgive him and pretend none of this was happening. But love wasn't enough to fix this. Love couldn't change our genetics or erase the months of deception. Love couldn't make me okay with building a future on such a twisted foundation. 3 weeks into our wait, I got an email notification that my results were ready. I stared at the email for an hour before opening it, my hands shaking so badly I could barely type my password. But when I logged into the website, I realized I could only see my own genetic information, not any family connections, until Ryan's results were processed too. I had to wait another week, checking the website obsessively every day, until both our results were complete. The night I got the notification that both tests were ready, I called Ryan at work. Therein I said simply, "I'll be right home." He made it home in 20 minutes, a drive that usually took him 45 minutes in evening traffic. I was sitting at our laptop in the living room when he walked in, but I hadn't logged into the website yet. "Are you ready?" I asked. Ryan sat down next to me on the couch, careful not to sit too close. "Are you?" I wasn't. I would never be ready for this moment. But we were out of time for not being ready. "Let's find out what we are to each other," I said, and clicked the login button. The website loaded slowly, each second feeling like an eternity. Ryan and I sat side by side on our couch, the same couch where we'd cuddled during movie nights, where he'd proposed with scattered papers recreating our first meeting, where we'd planned our future together. Now we sat with careful space between us, about to learn if our entire relationship was built on a foundation I could never accept. "Close relatives found," website announced cheerfully, as if this was good news. My heart hammered as I clicked on the relatives section. The page populated with Ryan's name at the very top of the list, marked with a little house icon indicating we lived at the same address. Next to his name was a percentage, 3.1% DNA shared. "What does that mean?" Ryan asked quietly. I clicked on the information link, though. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely control the mouse. The explanation made my blood run cold. "First cousins, once removed," I read aloud. my voice barely above a whisper. Or second cousins. The range for this amount of shared DNA is typically between second cousins and first cousins once removed. We stared at the screen in silence. There it was, in black and white scientific certainty. We weren't distant relatives who could laugh off the connection. We weren't unrelated people who could dismiss Patricia's research as an error. We were genuinely, undeniably, closely related family. "I think I'm going to be sick," I whispered. Ryan reached toward me instinctively, then stopped himself. "Emma, don't." I stood up abruptly, needing to get away from him, from the laptop, from the horrible truth displayed on our screen. "Just don't." I ran to the bathroom and barely made it to the toilet before throwing up. Everything I'd eaten that day came up, and then I kept dry heaving until my stomach muscles ached. Ryan appeared in the doorway, but I couldn't look at him. "Get away from me," I gasped between heaves. "Emma, please. Let me help you." "You are my cousin," I screamed, the words tearing out of my throat like they were lined with glass. "You are my cousin, and you knew. You suspected, and you said nothing." I've never seen anyone look as broken as Ryan looked in that moment. His face crumpled like I'd physically struck him, and tears started streaming down his cheeks. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I'm so sorry." But sorry wasn't enough. Sorry couldn't undo what we'd done. Sorry couldn't change the fact that I'd been intimate with a family member for 3 years. Sorry couldn't erase the wedding photos, the shared dreams, the plans for children that now felt impossibly tainted. I pushed past him and went to our bedroom. My bedroom, I guess, and slammed the door. I could hear Ryan in the living room, and it sounded like he was crying. Part of me wanted to comfort him, which made everything worse. Even now, even knowing what I knew, my instinct was still to care for him. What did that say about me? What did that say about us? I called Megan. I don't know why she was the first person I thought of, but suddenly I desperately needed to hear my sister's voice. "Emma, what's wrong? You sound terrible." "Meg," I sobbed into the phone. "I need you to come over. Right now, please. What happened? Are you hurt? Is Ryan hurt? Just come, please." I can't explain over the phone. Megan lived an hour away, but she made it to our house in 45 minutes. I heard her talking to Ryan downstairs when she arrived, but I couldn't make out the words. A few minutes later, she knocked on the bedroom door. "Emma, it's me. Can I come in?" I opened the door and fell into her arms, crying harder than I'd cried since we were children. Megan held me while I sobbed, stroking my hair and making soothing sounds, not asking questions until I was ready to talk. "Tell me what happened," she said gently when my crying finally subsided. So I told her everything. It's about Patricia's genealogy research, about Ryan's suspicious reactions, about the DNA test and the results we'd just discovered. Megan listened without interrupting, her expression growing more horrified with each detail. "My God, Emma," she breathed when I finished. "Oh, my God. I don't know what to do," I whispered. "I don't know how to process this. We're married, Meg. We were talking about having kids." Megan held me tighter. "First of all, you're going to be okay. This is horrible and shocking and traumatic, but you're going to be okay. How can you say that? How can anything ever be okay again? Because you're the strongest person I know. And because this isn't your fault, you didn't know. You couldn't have known. But Ryan suspected. He had some idea that there might be a family connection, and he never said anything." "Then he's the one who screwed up, not you. You fell in love with someone who lied to you about something incredibly important that makes you a victim, not a perpetrator." I hadn't thought about it that way. In all my self-disgust and horror, I'd been blaming myself along with Ryan, but Megan was right. I had been completely innocent in this situation. I'd entered our relationship with complete honesty and openness. Ryan was the one who'd withheld crucial information. "What do I do now?" I asked. "What do you want to do?" I thought about it seriously. I want to go back in time and never meet him. I want to erase the last 3 years and start over. "Okay, but since that's not possible, what's your second choice?" "I want a divorce." The words came out before I'd consciously decided to say them, but as soon as they left my mouth, I knew they were true. There was no coming back from this. No amount of therapy or time or understanding could make me okay with being married to my cousin. Even if we were distant cousins, even if the genetic risks were minimal, even if it was technically legal, I could never be comfortable with it. "Are you sure?" Megan asked gently. "I'm sure. I can't stay married to him, Meg. I know it's not entirely his fault. I know we're not that closely related in the grand scheme of things. I know other cultures don't have the same taboos about cousin marriage, but I can't do it. I can't stay in this marriage. We'll figure out how to get you divorced. What am I going to tell people? How do I explain this to mom and dad? To our friends? To everyone who was at our wedding? You don't have to tell them the real reason if you don't want to. You can say you discovered you were incompatible, or that Ryan had been dishonest about something important. Both of those things are true. I nodded, grateful for Megan's practical thinking. I need Ryan to leave. Tonight I can't sleep in the same house with him. Do you want me to tell him, or do you want to do it yourself? The thought of facing Ryan again made me feel nauseous, but I knew this conversation had to come from me. I'll do it, but will you stay? Just until he's gone, of course. We went downstairs together. Ryan was sitting at the kitchen table, staring at nothing. His eyes were red and swollen from crying, and he looked like he'd aged 10 years in the past few hours. Ryan, I said, trying to keep my voice steady, I need you to pack a bag and leave tonight. He looked up at me with desperate hope. Emma, please? Can we talk about this? Can we figure out how to work through it? There's nothing to work through. We're getting divorced, Emma. No, please don't do this. We can get counseling. We can work through this together. Ryan, we are cousins. We are blood relatives. There is no working through that. But we love each other, he said desperately. That has to count for something. What we have is real, regardless of genetics. I felt anger rise in my chest, hot and cleansing. What we have is built on lies. You suspected we might be related, and you said nothing. You let me marry you without knowing the truth. I wasn't sure you were sure enough to be worried about it. You were sure enough to try to hide it. And that makes everything we've built together a lie. Ryan broke down then, sobbing at our kitchen table. Please don't leave me. Please. I know I messed up, but I can't lose you. You're everything to me. You should have thought of that before you decided to keep secrets, I said, surprised by how cold my own voice sounded. Pack a bag, Ryan. Go stay with your mother or get a hotel room. I don't care where you go, but you can't stay here. He looked at me with such heartbreak that for a moment I almost wavered. Almost. But then I remembered the DNA results, percentage of shared genetic material, the scientific proof that we were family in a way that made our marriage feel fundamentally wrong. I'll pack some things, he said quietly. But Emma, this isn't over. I'm not giving up on us. It is over, I said firmly. And if you really love me like you claim to, you'll respect my decision and not make this any harder than it already is. Ryan went upstairs to pack while Megan stayed with me in the kitchen. I could hear him moving around our bedroom, opening drawers and closets, gathering the pieces of the life we'd built together. Every sound felt like another small death. When he came back downstairs with a suitcase and a duffel bag, he looked at me one more time. Love you, Emma. That's never going to change, no matter what some DNA test says. I didn't respond. I couldn't. Because despite everything, despite the betrayal and the disgust and the horror of what I'd learned, part of me still loved him too. And that made everything infinitely worse. After Ryan left, Megan stayed the night. We sat up until dawn, drinking tea and trying to process what had happened. She helped me think through the practical steps I'd need to take, finding a divorce lawyer, figuring out our shared assets, deciding what to tell our families and friends. You know, the family reunion is in 3 weeks, Megan said as the sun was coming up. I'd completely forgotten. I can't go to that. Can't face Patricia and all her excitement about the romantic coincidence of Ryan and me finding each other. You don't have to go, but you should probably call Patricia and tell her there's been a change in plans. The thought of that phone call made me want to hide under the covers forever, but Megan was right. I had to start dealing with the reality of the situation. The next few days passed in a blur of phone calls, legal consultations, and difficult conversations. I called in sick to work indefinitely using my accumulated personal time, while I tried to figure out how to rebuild my entire life. The hardest call was to Patricia. I'd been dreading it for days, knowing I had to tell her that her exciting family discovery had destroyed my marriage instead of bringing joy to the reunion. "Emma, sweetheart," she answered on the first ring. "I've been so excited to talk to you. I've been telling everyone about you and Ryan. The whole family is buzzing about the romantic story of how you two found each other." My stomach clenched. "Patricia, about that? There's been a complication." "Well, what kind of complication?" "Ryan and I are getting divorced." The silence on the other end of the line stretched so long I thought the call had dropped. "Patricia, are you there?" "I'm here," she said slowly. "I'm just shocked." "What happened?" "When I talked to Ryan last week, he seemed so devoted to you." I'd rehearsed this conversation with Megan, trying to find a way to explain without going into the humiliating details. "We discovered some information that made us realize we're not compatible in the way we thought we were. But Emma, you're perfect for each other. Anyone can see how much you love each other. Surely whatever the problem is, you can work through it together." "We can't," I said firmly. "And I'd prefer not to discuss the details. I just wanted you to know that Ryan won't be coming to the reunion, and I'm not sure if I'll be able to make it either." "Sweetheart, I'm so sorry. Is there anything I can do?" "Yeah." "Do you want to talk about it?" "No, but thank you." "Yeah. I just need some time and space to figure things out." After I hung up, I realized that conversation would probably spark a wildfire of family gossip. Patricia meant well, but she was definitely the type to share news with other relatives. Within days, my parents were calling with concerned questions about why they were hearing rumors of marital problems through the family grapevine instead of directly from me. "Emma, honey, what's going on?" Mom asked during one of her worried phone calls. "Patricia mentioned that you and Ryan are having problems, but she was very vague about the details." "We're getting divorced, Mom." "What, sweetheart? You've only been married a year. What could possibly have gone wrong so quickly?" I'd been dreading this conversation most of all. My parents adored Ryan. They'd welcomed him into the family completely, treated him like the son they'd never had. How could I explain that their beloved son-in-law was actually their nephew-in-law in the most uncomfortable way possible? "Ryan lied to me about something very important," I said carefully. "Something that I can't forgive or move past." "What kind of lie? Did he cheat on you?" "No, Mom. It's not that simple. Something that affects the fundamental nature of our relationship." "Emma, you're scaring me. Please tell me what happened." I took a deep breath. I decided that my immediate family deserved to know the truth, even if I kept it private from everyone else. "Ryan and I are related, Mom. We're cousins." The silence was deafening. "We're what?" Mom's voice was barely a whisper. Patricia's genealogy research was right. Ryan is great-uncle, Robert's great-grandson. We share a great-great-grandfather. The DNA test confirmed it. Oh my God, Emma." Ryan suspected there might be a family connection, but he never told me. He let me fall in love with him, marry him, without telling me we might be related. Mom started crying. "How did this happen? How did none of us know?" Ryan's father's family lost touch with everyone after his parents divorced. Ryan barely knew anything about his paternal relatives, but he should have told me when he started suspecting a connection. "I need to sit down," Mom said. "I need to process this." "Are you okay, sweetheart? You safe?" "I'm okay." Ryan moved out. "We're filing for divorce." "Do you need us to come there? Do you need anything?" "I need time," I said honestly. "I need to figure out how to move forward from this." After I told my parents, I had to tell my boss, my close friends, and eventually some of our mutual friends who kept asking why they hadn't seen Ryan and me together lately, stuck to the same basic explanation. Ryan had been dishonest about something fundamental to our relationship, and I couldn't stay married to him. Most people assumed he'd cheated or had some kind of secret addiction. A few pressed for details, but I held firm in my refusal to elaborate. The truth was too personal, too humiliating, too bizarre for casual conversation. The hardest part was dealing with our shared assets and belongings. Everything in our house carried memories now tainted by what I'd learned. The wedding photos on the mantel showed a couple who didn't know they were cousins. The furniture we'd picked out together, the dishes we'd received as wedding gifts, even the books on our shelves. Everything felt contaminated. Ryan kept texting and calling, begging for chances to talk, to explain, to work things out. His messages alternated between desperate apologies and attempts to convince me that our family connection wasn't that significant. Emma, please call me back. We can get through this together. Other cultures don't have the same taboos about cousin marriage. We can research it together, talk to counselors who specialize in this kind of situation. I've been doing research on the genetic risks, and they're minimal for second cousins. Could still have healthy children together. Please don't throw away our future over something that doesn't have to be a problem. I know I should have told you sooner. I was wrong to keep it from you. But I was scared of losing you over something that might not even matter. Can we please just talk? I blocked his number after the 10th message. I couldn't handle his attempts to minimize what felt like the most significant betrayal of my life. The divorce process was mercifully straightforward. Since we'd only been married a year and had minimal shared assets, we'd been renting our house, had separate bank accounts, and no children. The lawyers handled most of the communication, which meant I didn't have to see Ryan face to face. But 3 weeks after he'd moved out, he showed up at my workplace. I was walking to my car after a particularly difficult day when I saw him waiting by my Honda Civic. My first instinct was to turn around and go back inside, but I was tired of avoiding this conversation. We were going to have to face each other eventually. What are you doing here, Ryan? You won't take my calls? You won't respond to my texts? I had to see you. Looked terrible. He'd lost weight, his clothes were wrinkled, and he had dark circles under his eyes, like he hadn't been sleeping. There's nothing left to say, I told him. Our lawyers are handling everything. There's everything left to say. Emma, I love you. Yeah. I know I made a terrible mistake by not telling you about my suspicions, but that doesn't change what we mean to each other. It changes everything, Ryan. No, it doesn't. We're the same people we were before the DNA test. We have the same connection, the same love, the same dreams for our future together. I stared at him in disbelief. How can you say that? How can you act like finding out we're cousins is just some minor inconvenience? Because it is, he said desperately. Emma, we're barely related. Second cousins, maybe third. That's practically nothing in terms of genetics. It's not about genetics, Ryan. It's about honesty. It's about trust. It's about the fact that you suspected we were family members, and you said nothing. I wasn't sure. You were sure enough to worry about it? You were sure enough to try to keep it hidden? My voice was getting louder, and I noticed a coworker looking at us curiously from across the parking lot. You made that choice for both of us without giving me the information I needed to make my own decision. What if I'd told you? What if I'd said, hey, Emma, I think we might be distantly related based on some vague family stories? Would you have given us a chance? I don't know, I admitted, maybe not. But that should have been my choice to make. Exactly. Ryan stepped closer, hope lighting up his exhausted face. You would have ended things without even giving us a chance to see what we could be together. I saved our relationship by not saying anything. You didn't save anything, Ryan. You just delayed the inevitable. You made it 1,000 times worse by lying about it. I never lied. I just didn't bring up something I wasn't sure about. It's the same thing as lying, and you know it. We stared at each other across the parking lot, two people who had once shared everything now feeling like strangers. I could see that Ryan genuinely didn't understand why I was so upset about his deception. In his mind, he'd protected our relationship by keeping quiet about his suspicions. He'd prioritized our love over abstract concerns about family connections. But he couldn't see what his silence had cost us. Couldn't understand that every day he'd kept the secret was another day he'd stolen my ability to make informed choices about my own life. He couldn't grasp that the trust between us, the foundation of everything we'd built together, was permanently broken. I'm sorry, Ryan, I said finally. I'm sorry this happened to us. I'm sorry we fell in love without knowing what we were to each other, but I can't stay married to you. I can't build a life with someone who would make these kinds of decisions without me. No, I said firmly. This is over. Sign the divorce papers when your lawyer sends them. Don't contact me again. Don't come to my workplace. Let me move on with my life. I got in my car and drove away, leaving him standing in the parking lot. In my rearview mirror, I could see him watching me go, and for a moment, I felt a familiar pull of love and concern for him. That was 8 months ago. Today I'm sitting in my new apartment, a small but bright one-bedroom place across town from the house Ryan and I used to share. The divorce was finalized 3 months ago, and I'm slowly building a life that feels like mine again. The healing process has been harder than I expected. It's not just the end of a marriage, it's the loss of the story I thought I was living. For 3 years, I believed I was part of a beautiful love story about two strangers who found each other and built something wonderful together. Learning the truth felt like discovering that my entire life had been a lie. I went through all the stages of grief, sometimes cycling through them multiple times in a single day. Denial was easy at first. Surely the DNA test was wrong? Surely there was some explanation that would make everything okay? Anger came in waves, mostly directed at Ryan for his deception. But sometimes at myself for not seeing the signs, and occasionally at the universe for the cosmic cruelty of making me fall in love with my own cousin. Bargaining was the worst phase. I spent weeks researching cousin marriages in other cultures, reading about famous historical figures who married relatives, trying to convince myself that maybe I was being too rigid about something that wasn't actually that significant. I even made an appointment with a genetic counselor to understand the actual risks for any hypothetical children Ryan and I might have had. The genetic risks for second cousins are only slightly higher than the general population, she explained patiently. From a medical standpoint, there wouldn't be significant concerns about having children together. But medical facts couldn't change how I felt emotionally. The taboo around incest exists for good reasons, even when the genetic risks are minimal. More importantly, the scientific acceptability of our relationship couldn't repair the trust that Ryan had broken by keeping his suspicions secret. Depression hit hard around month 4. I took a leave of absence from work and spent most of February in bed, unable to find motivation for basic tasks like grocery shopping or laundry. Everything felt pointless. When the relationship I'd thought was the foundation of my future had turned out to be built on such rotten ground. My family was incredible throughout the whole process. Mom and Dad never once suggested that I was overreacting or being too dramatic about the situation. They understood immediately why Ryan's deception was unforgivable, even if they felt bad about the pain we were both experiencing. That poor boy, Mom said once after I'd told her about Ryan's parking lot plea. He's suffering too. But he made his choices, and now he has to live with the consequences. Megan was my lifeline during the darkest months. She'd show up at my apartment with groceries and tissues, forcing me to shower and eat actual meals, instead of surviving on crackers and wine. She never tried to tell me how to feel or suggest that I should get over it faster. "This isn't just a regular breakup," she said during one of our sister talks. "You're grieving the loss of your husband, your marriage, your understanding of your own family history, and your trust in your ability to judge people. That's a lot of loss to process." The family reunion happened without me. Patricia sent a gentle note saying they were all thinking of me and hoping I was doing okay. She'd apparently told the relatives that Ryan and I had divorced due to irreconcilable differences, and left it at that. I was grateful. She hadn't turned our personal tragedy into family gossip. Therapy helped, eventually. It took me 3 tries to find a counselor who didn't seem fascinated by the unusual nature of my situation. The first therapist kept asking probing questions about whether I'd ever felt attracted to family members before, which made me want to crawl out of my own skin. The second one seemed more interested in the psychological implications of cousin attraction than in helping me process my actual feelings. Dr. Martinez, my current therapist, treats the situation like what it is: a betrayal of trust that happened to involve a family connection. Rather than some kind of fascinating psychological case study, your husband made a unilateral decision about information that affected both of your lives, she said during one of our sessions. The fact that the information involved genetics is almost secondary to the fact that he chose deception over honesty. But what if he really wasn't sure? I asked, what if he genuinely thought he might be wrong about the family connection? Then he should have shared his uncertainty with you and let you help him figure it out together. That's what partners do. They face difficult questions as a team, not as individuals making secret decisions. Working through my feelings about Ryan has been complicated because I can see his perspective, even while knowing I can never forgive his choices. He was scared of losing me, so he chose to gamble with information that wasn't his alone to withhold. He prioritized short-term relationship preservation over long-term honesty and trust. In his mind, He was protecting what we had together. But relationships can't survive that kind of protection. Love built on hidden information isn't really love. It's love built on a lie. Even if the lie was meant to preserve the relationship itself. The hardest part has been dealing with well-meaning people who think I'm being too harsh about the situation. A few friends have suggested that I should consider getting back together with Ryan now that we've both had time to process the shock of the discovery. He made a mistake, my friend Jessica said over coffee last month. But it came from a place of love. Don't you think everyone deserves a second chance? Some mistakes are too big for second chances, I told her. Some choices reveal things about a person's character that can't be undone. I've also had to deal with people who seem to think the cousin relationship itself shouldn't be a big deal. It's not like your siblings, one acquaintance said dismissively. Lots of cultures have cousin marriages. You're being awfully dramatic about something that's basically normal in most of the world. Those comments hurt the most because they dismiss the validity of my own emotional response to the situation. Maybe cousin marriage is acceptable in other cultures, but I wasn't raised in those cultures. I was raised in a family and community where marrying a relative would be considered wrong. And that's the framework through which I understood my relationship with Ryan. More importantly, the cultural acceptability of cousin marriage doesn't address the real issue, which was Ryan's deception. Even if I lived in a culture where cousin marriage was completely normal, I'd still be devastated that my husband had hidden his suspicions about our family connection. I've started dating again, carefully and slowly. It's strange trying to build trust with new people when my faith in my own judgment has been so badly shaken. How do I know if someone is being honest with me? The first few dates were disasters. I found myself asking invasive questions about family history and demanding to see childhood photos to look for resemblances to people I knew. One guy actually asked if I was some kind of private investigator because I was so intense about wanting to know details about his background. Dr. Martinez helped me realize that I was trying to protect myself from ever being surprised again, but that hypervigilance was making it impossible to form genuine connections with new people. You can't protect yourself from all possible deceptions, she said. Yeah, but you can learn to trust your instincts and communicate your needs more clearly in relationships. I've been on several promising dates with a man named David who works as a teacher at the elementary school near my apartment. He's patient with my need to take things slowly, and he's been completely open about his family history without me even asking. Last week, he brought photo albums from his childhood to show me pictures of his parents and siblings, just because I'd mentioned being interested in family stories. I can tell this is important to you, he said simply. I want you to feel secure about who I am and where I come from. That level of intuitive understanding feels like a gift after months of dating people who seemed frustrated by my need for transparency. I still think about Ryan sometimes, especially when I'm doing things we used to enjoy together. I saw a movie last month that I knew he would have loved, and for a moment I felt sad that we couldn't share that experience anymore. I still love parts of who he was, but I can never trust him again. And love without trust is just nostalgia. I heard through mutual friends that Ryan has been struggling too. He apparently went through a period of trying to date people who looked like me, which struck everyone as deeply unhealthy. Been in therapy as well, working through his own guilt and regret about the choices he made. Part of me hopes he's able to find happiness and healing, though I never want to see him again. He's not a bad person. He's someone who made a terrible decision out of fear and selfishness. I can acknowledge that while still maintaining that what he did was unforgivable in the context of our marriage. I've learned things about myself through this experience that I might never have discovered otherwise. I learned that I'm stronger than I thought, capable of surviving the complete collapse of my understanding of my own life. I learned that I have non-negotiable boundaries around honesty and trust, even when maintaining those boundaries means losing someone I love. I also learned that love isn't always enough. For years, I believed that if two people truly loved each other, they could work through anything together. But love without honesty is worthless. Love without trust is unsustainable. Love built on deception will always be poisoned by the lies at its foundation. The family I thought I knew has shifted too. Learning about the branch of relatives we'd lost touch with has led to some interesting reconnections. I've stayed in touch with a few of the cousins Patricia found through her research, and it's been comforting to expand my sense of family connections in a positive way. I've also become much closer to my immediate family through this experience. Surviving something this traumatic and bizarre has shown me how solid my relationships with my parents and sister really are. They never wavered in their support, never suggested that I was wrong to prioritize my own emotional well-being over preserving a marriage built on deception. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if Ryan had been honest with me from the beginning. If he'd said during one of our early conversations about family, I think there might be some connection between our families. Should we look into that before we get too serious? Maybe I would have been scared off. Maybe I would have insisted on DNA testing before we got engaged. Maybe the knowledge would have made it impossible for me to feel comfortable with our relationship, even if the connection turned out to be distant. But maybe we could have faced the uncertainty together and found a way to build something honest and genuine. Maybe the openness and trust required to navigate that kind of complex situation would have made our relationship even stronger. I'll never know, because Ryan chose deception over transparency. He chose to gamble with both our futures rather than trust me with difficult information. And that choice cost us everything we might have been together. Today marks exactly 1 year since I opened that DNA testing website and learned the truth about my marriage. I'm not the same person I was a year ago. I'm more cautious, but also more confident in my own boundaries. I know now that I can survive the complete destruction of the life I thought I was building and emerge as someone stronger and more. I look back at that woman who was so excited about family reunions and